Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in to talk about the My Hero Academia Chapter 323 Summary. Spoilers. Spoiler summary. Hey everyone. Here we are, Chapter 323, the chapter that was going to be Ochako's answer to the question of who helps a hero when they are suffering, but actually it's not. It's not. We got the spoilers. It's not. You're actually going to be really surprised what the majority of the chapter is actually about, and then it does move eventually to Ochako, but interesting stuff regardless. One thing I will say, I've seen the pictures, I've looked at the chapter summary, and of course I will leave the links down below so you can go check it out yourself. But looking at this, I do think this is the Ochako hope moment that the author talked about in an interview. I think this is it. How do I feel about that? I really hope there's more, right? That's all I can really say. All I can say is I hope there's more in the future for Ochako, because I think that is something we can all agree on. We want all of our favorite characters to have more moments in the future, and Ochako is definitely deserving of more moments. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'll have the chapter summary here on the screen so we can follow along. The chapter begins with a flashback of the students at the principal's office just before they went after Deku. So yes, again, we are doing a flashback before doing the rest of the story. Personally, I don't like this style. I think it's just, I don't think it's very elegant. But whatever. Ida remembers what the principal said about showing everyone how great the UA barrier really is, but he thinks that if they can bring Izuku back peacefully, they will be enough to calm the civilians down. Nezu disagrees, saying that the issue is bigger than that. Izuku is currently the hero's trump card, so keeping him sheltered without proper security would pose a great risk to everyone. He compares the security level of UA to that of Tartarus, and says that after the gate was destroyed by Shigaraki at the beginning of the school year, he worked hard to improve it. Now the UA barrier is not only a barrier, it makes UA move. Now, of course, the summary always misses little details, and there are a few more little details. So let me very quickly inform you of the little details. When Nezu points out it has the same... Well, when Nezu compares it to Tartarus, Momo goes in and says that Tartarus was easily destroyed by Shigaraki. And that is what leads into the conversation of Nezu saying he improved the barrier to be better. So just keep that in mind when it comes to the next chapter. Momo did add in the obvious elephant in the room, which is actually pretty cool to know. Anyway, Nezu says that the UA barrier will move. Then he tells us how the campus has been divided into several areas and all of them are connected to a motorized elevator-like devices. If any sign of invasion detected, all these areas will be transported to underground shelter, and then they can follow various underground routes. The picture for this is insane. When I saw the picture, all I'm thinking is, how did you build all of this? Like, actually, how did this happen? Anyway, Kaminari says that this sounds like something straight out of a robot anime, and Nezu goes on to explain it more. The underground of the whole area around UA has been covered with 3,000 layers of fortified metal plates. How did they build this? Any abnormality in at least one of them activates the security system and the elevators. Just so you understand, this portion is just the author's way of saying, yo, here are all the specifics that you need to know and keep in mind so that you can start playing the game of what's it gonna take to make UA move. And also, wow, and he, like, the one thing the chapter ends up doing, and you can see this from the spoilers, is that the chapter is playing a lot of a justification game. They're trying to justify a lot, and that's why also you have some characters pointing out little things as Nezu is talking it. Anyway, in addition, the plates also serve to hold back any villains that are trying to attack, giving students and civilians time to get to the underground shelter. So that's pretty much, they want to get to the underground shelter, and the plates are underneath, so it's pretty much an issue of like, okay, if you're trying to go through the plates to get to the shelters, then yes, obviously, because you have 3,000 things, it's going to take time. Fair enough. Other hero schools have also reinforced the security and are connected to these routes, Shiketsu being one of them. Now, mind you, again, from the summary, there are a few missing details when it comes to Shiketsu. And there are a few more missing details. School Briefs has a segment where Kirishima, Tokoyami, and a few others fell into a mysterious underground portion of UA. So that's actually pretty neat. And I think you will see a reference to... actually, no, I'm looking at the picture right now, and you 100% are going to see a reference to School Briefs in this chapter coming up. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, when it comes to Shiketsu, Nezu points out that they were working with Shiketsu ever since the substitution incident happened, and there's a picture of Toga along with Keimi in the chapter. And then Shoto and Bakugo point out that, yeah, cooperation with UA, they remember when they were told about this during not joint training, when they were told about this during the provisional license makeup exams. So keep that in mind. So there was a little bit more information going in there. Anyway, Tokuyami comments that the metal plates seem specifically designed to deal with Shigaraki's awakened quirk, which spreads to other surfaces, like his spreading decay. He asked why the principal already set this up before the cultural festival when there was no available information about his quirk. Now, this one, we had really good discussions about it during the live stream, and ultimately, I think the answer that we are given so far is good, and it makes sense to me. So Nezu says that he just followed his instinct without any concrete evidence. He says that even something incomprehensible or unnecessary can be the missing step to reach the end of a challenging path. Okay, so the way that flows together in the summary gives a kind of bad impression of what I think's actually happening. With regard to Shigaraki, all that Nezu really says is that I had no evidence, it was just a hunch. And then he goes on to say, because it was so sketchy, I provided all the money to do this. And what the spoilers miss out on is that they go through this whole little bit here where they talk about how Principal Nezu is actually a pretty big deal in the world. And I have a few thoughts about that, but I'll leave that for the video or the chapter proper discussion on Sunday. Anyway, going back to this, what I will say is that this makes sense. The fact that Nezu could have predicted spreading decay makes sense to me from the perspective that Nezu is the smartest creature in the world, and Nezu runs a school that has witnessed generations upon generations of heroes improve their quirks. He is in a school that presides over, for instance, Sun Eater, who has already attributed many successes to UA. He is in a school that presides over Vanta Black, who realized that he could move into black objects and also take control of them. If there is one person who should be aware of the capacity of a quirk's ability to grow, it is the man who runs curriculums specifically designed to help people grow their quirks. This guy is the guy with all the relevant case studies to know the extent of how much a quirk can grow. So that's why, if we're talking about it from the logic of why he could potentially predict that, then that's how we have to kind of go about it. If we're going from a logical perspective and not like some kind of conspiracy. Anyway, that part of the summary where it's saying that something incomprehensible or unnecessary can be the missing step to reach the end of a challenging path, that has more to do with the issue with the people. That wasn't in any which way referencing the situation with the metal plates and predicting Shigaraki. Anyway, we cut back to the present, with the civilians refusing to let Izuku in. Izuku's mom, Bakugo's mom, Jiro's parents were there, Eri is in the dorms with Class B, and Monma's actually the one taking care of her. And then we have Kota and Ragdoll. They're all shown and they all look concerned. Number 13 comments that some people were even convinced by the principal's speech, but not all of them. Genus interrupts Mike's shouting and starts talking to the civilians, explaining that the heroes tried to use Deku to attract the villains and it didn't work. He says that even though Izuku is the target, he also is the greatest weapon. He understands that this is not the ideal situation, but says it's the best alternative and asks them to let Izuku stay in UA until he's ready to fight again. There's actually a lot more nuance to what Best Genus is saying. The summary doesn't really do a good job giving us the information. Like, Best Genus is just being very upfront with the people, saying like, yeah, we know this might not even be the best plan, this might be like the second best plan or the third best plan, but all the same, it's our best option. So it's actually pretty cool. Best Genus comes in there and he's being very effective. The civilians seem to get even angrier, saying that the country is only in such chaos because the heroes failed now. Because the heroes failed, and now having failed again, they want to force the civilians to take the risk. So that's referencing specifically Best Genus acknowledging that the Izuku plan didn't work very well. As they yell, Izuku's danger sense activates, and this is a pretty good looking 2-page spread. But before they can do anything, Uraraka grabs Mike's megaphone, uses her quirk on herself, and floats over the civilians straight to Yue's rooftop. Uraraka begins her speech by confirming that Izuku does indeed have a special power, not saying what it is. There's actually a segment where she's kind of being a little bit... She's being tricky. She doesn't want to say what it is. But they say... she does tell them that it's the power made to fight against All for One. The civilians reply that this is exactly why he can't stay there. Mind you, Uraraka, when she jumps to the rooftop, I don't know, that civilian that's talking to her, she's not going to be able to hear that. But Uraraka anyway says that this is exactly what Izuku himself was thinking. He tried to stay away from his classmates and they had to go and bring him back. She specifically says that the reason Izuku is back here is because of them. She continues asking the civilians to take a good look at Izuku right now after how all this burdened by himself. There are some panels emphasizing his feet and his arms, and some shocked civilians looking at him. Uraraka says that Izuku is the one who wants to change the current situation the most, and that he kept moving forward for other people's sake, even though he knew he could be attacked at any moment. Anyway, Ochako continues shouting, saying that having a special power doesn't make Izuku a special person. Bakugo then appears next to Izuku, saying that the civilians desperately rioting, while ignoring the security system, is a perfect example of something Izuku can't handle by himself and needs to leave it to others. And there's actually an interesting note about this. What Bakugo is saying here is like, you're going to be in trouble with the civilians, so let us help you, other heroes. And this is just, you know, who helps heroes when they are suffering and need help? Well, Bakugo. But yeah, then we have a really interesting part where it cuts to an internal monologue from Nezu acknowledging that taking the first step is hard. And mind you, the first step in this context is in regards to the people taking a chance, a leap of faith towards believing in the heroes after they have failed 5 times before. And I say 5 times facetiously, you know, after they have failed many times before. And he then says he thinks that this step in specific will lead to the birth of a hero that can surpass even All Might. The thing here is that monologue is superimposed on Ochako screaming into the megaphone. And it gives the impression that the one that Nezu is talking about is Ochako. When someone finds a way to overcome that one difficult step and forge a path, the greatest hero is born. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. It's funny if the author is saying like, hey, guys, Ochako is actually going to be the greatest hero. Because what she's going to do, she's going to change society. Now, mind you, if Ochako actually does go all the way in the future and she actually becomes like a poster girl for be nice to heroes, then, you know, societal, that's a pretty big hero in a really particular sense. But you can kind of tell now why I think this is the hope spot. It's just when you have a man talking about the advent of the greatest hero and you have Ochako in the rain with a megaphone trying to force people to take the next step. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Now, when it comes to the spoilers, there are a few points that I think are very interesting. But I have to wait for the proper translation because there's some interesting contradictions that are occurring, but they're like on a philosophical level. And they do have my attention, but overall, when it comes to these spoilers this time around, yeah, a lot of mecha explanation of how the UA works, and we'll have to see that. And for everyone that was following me on the live stream yesterday, worth noting, the 300 heroes, that was a fake spoiler. It looks like there's no 300 heroes being mentioned here, so that's unfortunate. If we get lucky though, maybe those heroes pop up somewhere else. Now, one thing that's very worth pointing out in general, and this isn't going to change from the spoilers to the official translation, is that Best Jeanist is the one that goes in with the logical approach, and Ochako, she just goes in with the emotional approach. Like what Ochako's doing, Ochako's doesn't actually contribute any new bit of information. There's nothing in there that speaks to any idea she has. What Ochako did is just say Izuku's thought process out loud, and then she appealed to the people's sense of guilt or sentimentality by telling them to look at Izuku. So when you have Ochako's entire process there, you have to, this will become apparent with the final translation, she's adding nothing. She is just flatly explaining what Izuku was thinking to everyone that was there, and then making them feel bad that he's been doing that many things, and, you know, drumming up the sympathy vote. Now, really, I gotta say, look, I do think that the emotional appeal, and I think saying Izuku's thought process out loud is valuable. I think the emotion is probably the better way to go about this, because the logical approach right now, everyone knows they're in a compromised situation, so the logical approach is probably going to shoot people in the foot, because the logical approach requires acknowledging failure, and acknowledging failure in front of a panicked crowd legitimately doesn't work. So ultimately, like, it's a mixed bag sort of thing. On one hand, very smart to elucidate Izuku's thought process, talk about what Izuku was doing. Very smart to do that. But on the other hand, when you look at Ochako, all Ochako has done is that she's become a megaphone for Izuku's internal thoughts. All she is doing is conveying Izuku's idea to the people. So when it comes to next week's chapter, we really have to hope that we see something uniquely Ochako, other than being able to say, like, what's uniquely Ochako is that she's smart enough to use emotional rhetoric, and she's smart enough to use the rhetoric of the main character. Like, that's so far all you can really say about Ochako's choices here. She was smart enough to think, to convey Izuku's thoughts to the people. It's going to be an interesting week. It's going to be interesting. It's like, again, it's unfortunate too that we're pushing Ochako's final word to next week, and that we had to fill the chapter with the UA barrier. If I just looking at that, like, honestly, you could have had all of Ochako. Here's the thing. Because it's a flashback, it actually makes it even more easier to even more easy to take the UA barrier stuff and put it in another chapter, because it's a flashback. It doesn't matter if you don't bring it up. You don't have to reference the flashback. I think you could have, like, moved the majority of the stuff with the mech, with the barrier to another chapter. Maybe you could have had more of Ochako here, but it ultimately tells us Horikoshi's priorities. He cares more about the barrier than he does about Ochako, because, like, it's not even an issue of you need the information about the barrier. You could have gone into this chapter without the you could have gone into the chapter without having the details of the barrier, and you could have gone in with just the promise of the barrier, that being the stuff they said in the previous chapter, like, oh yeah, you can't believe what this barrier can do. It can link up with Shiketsu, it's going to be so cool, all that kind of stuff like that, right? You could have had that right there. You could have gone into this chapter with that promise, and then you could have had them, you know, just feed you the flashback at another point in time. But that ultimately tells us what Horikoshi thought was the more important information to give us faster. And he effectively said, yeah, got to give you this information now, and then again next week we can finish up Ochako. It's interesting. It's interesting. The decision-making process when it comes to the delivery of information does give us an idea about what he's prioritizing, which to me kind of sounds like maybe we will be seeing this barrier come up sooner rather than later. But yeah, overall for this chapter, we got interesting stuff. I think this is going to be one that's going to be extremely reliant on the final wording for a lot of this. But yeah, this is probably Ochako's whole spot. Guys, let me know what you thought down below. Gonna leave it there, and until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day. This is just one of those chapters where it's hard to actually talk about it without getting the exact wording, and that's a little bit unfortunate, but I hope you enjoyed. Till next time, everybody,